My name is Julian Vance, and 3 years ago, I bought a rundown substation lot at a county auction for $11,000 because nobody else in the room understood what they were looking at. Everyone else saw a fenced patch of weeds with a rusted transformer humming behind chain link. I saw the single point of interconnection that fed power to the entire Oakmont Ridge subdivision, a private microgrid arrangement that the original 1987 developer had set up. Because running county lines out to that stretch of hills would have cost triple what the builder wanted to spend. So instead, he built his own substation, wired the whole neighborhood into it, and quietly sold the utility rights off to a shell company decades before anyone living there today ever signed a mortgage. That shell company folded in 2003. The assets sat dormant, technically owned by nobody, until the county finally auctioned off the lien, and I picked it up, not because I wanted to be a power company, but because I do infrastructure law consulting, and I recognized exactly what kind of sleeping giant that scrap of land actually was. I spent almost a year quietly formalizing it, registering as a legitimate small private utility provider, getting licensed with the State Public Utilities Commission, and folding every single household in Oakmont into service contracts that, frankly, most of them never bothered reading because their power just kept working and their bills stayed roughly the same as before. Nobody asked who owned the wire. Nobody asked who owned the meter. And that ignorance is exactly what let Brenda Carmichael believe, with the full confidence of a woman who has never once in her life been told no, that the electricity flowing into her driveway was some kind of ambient public utility, hers by birthright, hers to distribute to anyone she pleased. Brenda ran the Oakmont Ridge HOA the way some people run cults, through fear, selective enforcement, and a truly staggering ego. She'll find a widow $400 for a garden gnome she decided violated aesthetic harmony. She had a disabled veteran's wheelchair ramp reported to code enforcement because it wasn't architecturally consistent. So, when she bought herself a Porsche taken to complete, her personal brand of suburban royalty, and discovered her home charger wasn't fast enough for her taste, she did what she always does. She decided the rules simply didn't apply to her, and she started plugging her car into the shared 240-volt maintenance outlet on the community clubhouse, the one explicitly reserved in writing for HOA landscaping equipment and reserved under my utility service agreement for commercial load only, billed at commercial rates capped at limited daily draw, specifically because that line runs current directly off my substation's secondary transformer, the one piece of equipment in that entire grid that cannot handle sustained residential vehicle level draw, without tripping load balancing across 3 surrounding streets. I know this because I watched it happen in real time on my monitoring dashboard. Watched voltage sag hit 4 different houses at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Watched an elderly man's oxygen concentrator on Maplewood Drive flicker off for 11 seconds before backup kicked in. And when I traced the draw spike back to its source, it was Brenda, sitting in her car in a lawn chair, scrolling her phone, charging for free on infrastructure she did not own, did not maintain, and had never once asked permission to use. I went to her directly first because I try to be a reasonable person before I become anything else. I explained, calmly standing in that clubhouse parking lot, that the outlet she was using was metered separately, that it belonged to a private utility entity, that her draw was destabilizing service to her neighbors, and that if she wanted a dedicated high-speed charger, I would happily quote her a commercial hookup like anyone else. She looked at me like I had just confessed to a crime. She informed me, and I am paraphrasing only slightly, that electricity is a public good, that nobody owns the wires in America, and that I was clearly running some kind of scam preying on hardworking homeowners when I unplugged her charging cable to protect the 4 other homes she was destabilizing. She screamed that I had assaulted her property, and before I had even reached my car, she was on the phone with the sheriff's department claiming a man was vandalizing HOA equipment and threatening residents, 2 deputies arrived within 9 minutes. 'Cause in a county this size, that's fast. And I want you to imagine standing in a dark parking lot at 10 at night while a woman points at you and insists you're a criminal, while you're holding a folder of state utility licensing documents in your other hand, wondering if tonight is the night decades of quietly building something legitimate gets erased by someone else's tantrum. And honestly, this is exactly the part of the story where I need you watching all the way through. Because what happens over the next 6 weeks is the part nobody who's only halfway paying attention gets to. So, if you're still here, hit that subscribe button on HOA Drama Neighbor now, because this is where it turns from a parking lot argument into a full legal collapse. The responding deputies, to their credit, actually asked to see documentation before doing anything, and I handed over my PUC registration, the recorded easement, and metering logs showing the exact voltage sag timestamps matched to her vehicle's charging sessions. One deputy actually laughed, not unkindly, and told Brenda this looked like a civil utility dispute, not a criminal matter, and that she needed to take it up with the utility provider, meaning me, in writing. She was furious, but fury wasn't a mistake. The mistake was what she did next, because rather than quietly stopping, Brenda decided the real problem was that I existed as a private entity with authority over her. So she spent the next month rallying the HOA board to challenge my utility license itself, filing a formal complaint with the State Public Utilities Commission alleging I was operating an illegal, predatory monopoly, dragging for board members into signing affidavits they clearly hadn't read closely, all in an effort to get my substation license revoked, so the neighborhood could seize the infrastructure under some vague theory of community ownership. What Brenda did not know, what none of them bothered to check before filing state paperwork with their names on it, was that a formal PUC complaint triggers a mandatory infrastructure audit, and that audit doesn't just examine me. It examines every household connected to that grid, every service agreement, every meter, every unauthorized draw over the past 3 years. Because state regulators don't investigate half a system, they investigate the whole thing. The audit took 5 weeks, and it found exactly what I already knew it would find: that Brenda Carmichael had been running an unmetered secondary line from the clubhouse maintenance outlet to her own garage for private residential use for over a year, not just for her Porsche, but bypassing her own home meter entirely for a portion of her household draw. A textbook case of utility theft under state code, compounded by the fact that she had signed as HOA president the very commercial use service agreement she was violating, meaning she had actual knowledge of the terms she broke, which under state law elevates unmetered theft of utility service from a misdemeanor into a felony, with restitution calculated on estimated draw over the full theft period. The state didn't just fine her, they referred it to the county prosecutor, who filed felony theft of utility services. And simultaneously, the PUC audit cleared my license entirely and formally confirmed my exclusive right to that substation and every connected line, meaning the HOA board's complaint had accidentally handed regulators a signed, notarized paper trail, proving their own president's crime while cementing my legal monopoly over their electricity for the next 20 years. Under the original 1987 franchise terms, which I now legally control outright. Brenda stood in criminal court facing felony charges, a restitution order exceeding $60,000 for stolen service, and a civil suit from 4 separate neighbors whose medical equipment and home systems had been damaged by the voltage instability her theft caused, one of which included the family of the man whose oxygen concentrator failed. She lost her HOA presidency by unanimous board vote the week the audit results became public. She lost her Porsche to a lien when she couldn't cover both the restitution and her existing loan. And every single resident of Oakmont Ridge, it's the same people who once trusted her word over a stranger's licensing paperwork, now receives a monthly bill from a company they finally understand in full is legally, permanently, unshakably mine, funded in no small part by the theft case she herself triggered. Because sometimes the most devastating collapse a person can suffer is watching their own arrogance become the very evidence that convicts them. And if this story got your blood boiling in the best way, drop a comment telling me which part made you gasp. Because there's a lot more where this came from, and I promise you the next one goes even deeper.